everybody, my name is Mars. You can call me MG if you would like, and today I have for you the top 10 dark academia books that I just cannot wait to read. I don't own any of these physically, which is probably why I haven't read them yet, but they are ones that I am just itching to get my hands on. So if you don't know what dark academia is, it's not exactly a genre, it's more of like a literary aesthetic, we'll call it, and it is characterized by darker themes, an academic setting, which you can probably guess those just based on the fact that it's dark academia, and usually there's some sort of pursuit of knowledge or something else similarly unattainable for the characters, and it's just something I really, really enjoy. If you didn't know, I am the author of several dark academia books myself, and it's just something about the academic setting mixed with these darker themes just really, really does it for me. So I have a whole long list of dark academia books that I love, and an even longer list of ones that I have yet to read but really, really want to. So we're going to talk about the 10 that I'm most excited to get to in this video. So a little bit of a disclaimer, this is not in any particular order, it's just 10 books listed in the order that I thought of them, and I'm also not going to be giving super detailed descriptions of these because I like to go into books somewhat blind, so I don't actually know a ton about these books, just enough that it makes me interested in them. So let's get talking. First up is A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee, which is a queer dark academia book, which is just a bonus for me. I am queer and love reading queer stories, so it just adds a little bit more excitement to this. There's supposedly only female and non-binary characters in this. There are no men whatsoever, which is very intriguing. I'm curious as to how that plays out, especially in terms of pronouns. I know when I am writing and I have characters of the same gender in one scene, my pronouns can get kind of confusing, so hopefully that's not the case in this book, but I'll have to see. There's also like witchy occult vibes, and I don't know anything else, but that is more than enough to have me wanting to read this. Then we have Babble by R.F. Kuang, which I feel like everyone has read by now except for me, but this I believe is historical fantasy, which I love historical settings in my fantasy books. There's a language-based magic system, and it deals with like translation, which is fascinating, and there's also footnotes throughout the story, which I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I personally love stories that have footnotes within reason. Like, obviously it's not going to be necessary in every story, but in certain ones it does add like a little bit of spice to it, a little something special, so I'm very excited to read this and hopefully love it. The third book on my list is a very recent release, and this is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft, and this is gothic fantasy, and I love gothic stories so much. It is queer and rivals to lovers, and there's some sort of murder mystery element while the characters are on some expedition to find this magical folkloric wellspring, and that just hits so many boxes for me that I'm like, I need to get my hands on this right now. Normally, I don't read a ton of new releases, especially from authors I've never read from before, like Alison Saft, but I would be willing to put my money out on this one because I just really think I'm going to love it. The next book on my list is one I'm kind of apprehensive about, and that is Bunny by Mona Awad. And the reason why I'm apprehensive about it is because I have read from Mona Awad before. I picked up All's Well, and I ended up DNFing it just a few chapters in because I could not get into it. All's Well follows a disabled character, and I am disabled. I have chronic pain in my joints, and that's similar to what the main character was dealing with, and just the headspace that this character was in was kind of damaging for me to read, so I had to stop, but I still want to give Mona Awad another try, and Bunny just sounds so weird. It is horror, and it potentially has some fantasy elements, I'm not quite sure, but I am intrigued. Up next is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, which is a retelling of King Arthur, and I really like King Arthur vibes in a story, so that's a plus. There's also grief as one of the main themes because the main character is dealing with the death of her mother, and books about grief are some of my favorites. There's also a series that follows. I think there's 2 books after this, maybe 3, and we all know that I love a good series, so I cannot wait to get this. Number 6 on my list is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and I feel like over the past year, everyone and their mother has read and been talking about this book, and I've seen some really good reviews and some really bad reviews, but I am leaning more towards the good ones based on what I've seen them talking about. It sounds like stuff I would like, so it's pretty World War II-esque vibes, so we've got that historical fantasy element. There's magic and gods and like a rivalry, hence why it's called Divine Rivals, and I do have plans to read this before the year is out, so fingers crossed. I really love it. The next book is Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz, and first I just want to say that this cover is absolutely stunning. The way the dress makes like the shape of an anatomical heart is just brilliant design. I'm obsessed with that. And this is a gothic historical book. We've already established that I love gothic vibes and historical vibes, and this follows a woman who wants to train to be a surgeon, and she teams up with a resurrection man to get bodies to practice on because she's not allowed at the local school. A resurrection man is just someone from Victorian question mark era who would dig up bodies to sell to doctors and stuff for extra money, and I've kind of been obsessed with the concept of the Resurrection Man ever since I read A Tale of Two Cities when I was in high school, because one of the characters is a Resurrection Man, and I just think it's fascinating. So this combo seems very much up my alley, and I don't know if this is fantasy. I read the blurb and it like kind of seems like it might be, but I'm not entirely sure, and this is the first book in a duology, so again, a series. Great stuff. Next up is potentially a controversial one, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This has had some discussion about the depiction of certain harder topics that some people are not quite happy with how things played out, so I'm bearing that in mind, but it is fantasy horror, it's got a New England setting, and the two of those things really appeal to me. I've heard that it's quite gory at times, and I do enjoy that kind of horror, so I am apprehensive but excited for this one. I've never read from Leigh Bardugo before, and I don't really have an interest in the Grishaverse, even though that's Leigh Bardugo's like biggest works, but this one I think I potentially will really enjoy. The penultimate item on my list is Vita Nostra by, and I have to read this one off because it is a Russian couple who wrote this book, Marina and Sergei Dyachenko, I believe is how it's pronounced, and it was translated by Julia Matov-Hersey. This is a bit of a weird one. I've heard about it years ago, and I just have not been able to pick it up yet, but I really, really want to. I think about it quite often. This is like a blend of sci-fi and fantasy, which is always a fun time. It is part of a series, but only part of the series has been translated, and also only some of the series like directly connects, and other books in it are companion novels, and I'm not quite sure which ones have been translated and which ones haven't, so it's a little bit confusing. I'll have to do a little bit more research into that aspect, but at the very least I would be able to read this first one, and I'm very excited to, as I am with every other book on this list. And the last book on my top 10 dark academia books that I am very interested in getting to is potentially the only one that doesn't have fantastical elements to it, and that is Special Topics in Calamity Physics by Marisha Pessl. I have read from Marisha Pessl before. I read Neverworld Wake, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very interesting and entertaining, and this one just sounds a little bit more up my alley, so this one has the potential to be a favorite. I think the main character might be autistic based on the like blurb that I read. I don't remember any of the details of the actual like plot that are mentioned in the blurb, but I do remember the main character giving me autistic vibes, which I am autistic and I really like reading about autistic characters, so that is a bonus to me. And this has nothing to do with the story, but this is probably one of my favorite book covers that I've seen in a while. I might even like this cover more than I like the cover for Anatomy, a Love Story, so it's just really good, and something about it does something for me, so that's another plus. And there you have it. Those are the 10 dark academia books that I am super excited to be getting to. hopefully within the next year or so, I would like to maybe not all read all of these, but most of them. We will see. Not all of them are things that I have access to. Like I said, I don't own any of these physically. I do have ebooks for some of them, but we will just have to see if I can thrift some or maybe get them as Christmas gifts. My mom did ask me for a book list for Christmas shopping, so I do have to get that to her, and some of these titles are probably going to end up on that list. But that is neither here nor there. We have now come to the end of the video, so if you've enjoyed it, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. You can subscribe to my channel for more content, and then we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone.